this time of the year, clients and potential clients often reach out to me with a very personal question, I guess you could say, that kind of sometimes it starts the relationship between them and I, as far as doing some habitat improvements and design on their properties down the road. And maybe that's just a question to reach out so they know that they've got somebody in their corner. Now, some things come into that, and that question is it time to buy or sell? This time of the year, I think I get more of those phone calls because of the we're all kind of on a regroup of the season, if you will. We're in that rebuilding time period. Maybe you're taking your focus off from the whitetail woods, and maybe you're putting it more back into some family time that we're going to talk about here. And also maybe there's folks out in the woods or in the world that you can tell where my thoughts at. It's always in the woods, but it's in the world that the thought goes around. This time of the year they start you start switching from that deer mentality into ice fishing and snowmobiling. We're a big snowmobile family, and so taking some other things off from the that 90-day grind, if you will, which takes in that whitetail passion that we all love to experience. The first thing that we're going to talk about here is the years versus your success. There's 5 points here that we're going to touch on today, guys, and I think they all play their own part in determining, is it time to buy? Or if you have been on a property and you're trying to get that that ROI, and you're really trying to get the most out of that property, and maybe it isn't working, so is it time to sell? So the number one thing here that we're going to chat about is, I have it labeled as years in review versus success. Well, the years in general on a property versus the success is kind of I don't say it's a heated topic, but it's something that you can view that word success in a lot of different ways. When we're talking about success through the whitetail woods, I really recommend that you kind of take a broader look, if you will. There's very few properties, and there are, because I have clients out there that are single, whether it's male or female. I have properties out there that were handed down from generation to generation. That's always been a hunting property. And I do have those situations where it's just focused just strictly on whitetails, and that's the only thing that the property's for, and you don't set foot on it unless the wind is right, and you don't do anything. You don't ride ATVs, you don't ride snowmobiles, you don't do anything. There's no family retreats, no camping, nothing, unless it's just whitetail. Well, that's great, and there's a place for that. But I see that a lot of focus is on the review of success, is focused on just pulling the trigger on, or sending an arrow down range on a mature buck. So to me, it's more than that, because it's kind of that personal connection that you have with your property. That's something that I kind of go in depth with in the analysis package that we do with my clients, and we really dig deep and we try to find that source. Is because if in a few years, if you start to review the process, and that review is not strictly all on success, because your couple of things. One, your area in general just doesn't produce the mature deer because of some other things we're going to talk about here, or the area isn't giving you and your family back anything else outside of deer hunting. That's when you start finding the properties for sale. And sadly, I have really found great properties out there that are being sold, that clients have me come on and kind of do a last once over. Should we sell this? Should we not? Are we doing anything wrong? How much is it going to cost to improve this? And they weigh all that out on the table before they list it. And usually by the time that I get to those properties that are kind of in this question of review, if it's really worth having it or not, the sad part of it is it's probably pretty much already set in stone. It's probably pretty much gone, because at that point something is missing. The habitat isn't correct, the deer in the area aren't correct, you're having some influences from the outside in that you can't control, stuff like that. So that's what we're going to continue talking about here. So that's kind of a review versus success. Maybe look at things not just as a success as far as deer hunting. So there's other things that play into that to answer the question, is it time to sell, or is it time to buy new property to advance your property with you along that journey? The number two thing here is your neighbors and your neighborhood. That kind of ties in as we go here. These all kind of tie into each other, but the number two one especially ties into that pretty strongly, is because there's that old saying, you have to be where mature deer are in order to kill mature deer. And that's a very strong message, because in other parts of the country, other than, unlike Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, some of these real high pressured states, Wisconsin and portions, the neighbor influence in the neighborhood, the neighbor itself, the county doesn't influence in those lower pressure states. It doesn't influence those properties like it does in a higher pressured state such as Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, and some other higher deer hunter numbers. And the reason for that is, guys, is because you can have the greatest property in the world with the best potential and really be trying to do everything correct, and from your access to your the deer that you're electing to harvest and trying to build a herd, and the neighborhood and your neighbors just aren't at that point that you are now. And there's nothing wrong with that, because obviously, like we've talked before, I think that's where this whole disconnect is right now in this whole country, not only the whitetail woods, but maybe that's just not for them. Maybe that's something that they're never going to do. Maybe that's something that you just haven't reached out or pursued enough to maybe bring them to the same playing field that you're on, or try to build a better herd in your area. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. I'm not going to lie to you. It doesn't happen overnight. But in the states such as Illinois, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, there's a whole list of states that I could list that have the potential to take a mediocre property and be in an area where the influence maybe isn't all mature deer mentality, and you can still make a mediocre property excellent or great. And the reason for that is simply because there's more mature deer there per county than there is in some other states. So that's something that you have to look back on. It's kind of ties to that review thing. You have to look back on that and say, are my efforts getting paid back at the fullest, that the potential that they could possibly be? How much of that is being influenced by my neighbors in my neighborhood? And like I said, we could add the word county to that here. You could add the word state to that as well. Now, not everybody has the ability. I'm in that situation right now. I don't have the need to do that right now, the want to do that right now as far as move out of state. My boy has a couple years left of school, and then we'll decide. But I still hunt across the country. But we haven't elected to move out of state yet. I mean, that sounds real simple. You hear that all the time. Hey, if you don't like where you're at, then just move. Well, that's easier said than done in a lot of cases, because of family and work and business and everything else that comes with that. And so that is when you start thinking outside of the box. You start thinking, am I getting that payment back that I want to on that return on investment point that we'll talk about? Am I getting that back? Is all my hard work kind of being dead-ended by my neighborhood? And what's the potential, what's the cap of what I can really do with a piece of property? And so when you're looking at that, when you're buying it, you need to figure that out before you buy property. You need to figure out what that influence is in that area. Start talking to some other people. If you've got friends, there's a reason that you're in that area looking to buy property. So you probably have a connection with somebody there that can really, give you some solid information about, should you buy this because of what your goals are, or if you already own that piece in that and you're looking at, is that piece really the one that you want to own? That kind of ties into the sell aspect of it as well. Number three here, acreage size, and I've got the abbreviation here, or the emphasis put on $2 to maintain. The acreage size to me is something that I try to really help folks tune in on. Is I see probably more so than not the properties that I visit. I see this acreage size being a hinder. Everybody has the mentality that everybody wants to own more property. I'm that same way. Right now we're selling the house farm here and we're going to another property, and I'm trying to get the most property that I can afford up front. So what happens is I see that folks in general really save and they save and they save, and they try to buy the most acreage that they can possibly get, kind of give you a little elbow room, if you will. What happens with that is then they get the property and there's not enough money either left over or that residual income to habitat improve or maintain. That's where that dollars to maintain it or improvement or improve it and maintain it comes in. That's where I see the disconnect. A lot of folks can buy parcels around the country, private parcels, or have the ability to do that, but not very many of them have the ability to maintain it and or improve it the way that it needs to. So I would highly recommend that. This is probably one of the biggest points on these list of 5 here to focus on, is if you don't have the money that's going to be there year after year after year to improve it, to maintain it, then you got to start looking at other entities. Like how do you bring some more income into that. That's a separate video that we got coming down the road here, as far as other things that you can tie to your property, and should you look at that in that income state program, such as that CRP programs. That's one of the biggest things that I see. So that's something to focus on. Like I said, I highly recommend buying a property that is an acreage amount that's within your budget, obviously up front, and then focusing that a little bit farther down so you can make sure that you can maintain that through habitat, through your food plots. You got enough money left in there every year to really give the herd the most emphasis on those food plots, and really go the extra mile to make sure the food there. Obviously that helps your hunt, and that helps the herd. Without that, if you aren't able to do the farming aspect of it yourself, the food plots, or you're not able to do the maybe it needs some dozer work, maybe it needs that continuous tree work, the hinge cutting. If you're not able to do all that stuff, obviously none of that stuff is free. It all costs money, and if you outsource it, and sweat value in that as well, sweat equity in there as well, that it costs something to do that. So you really have to focus on, is it worth is it an 80 that I need, or do I need to buy a 40 so I can stay ahead of the property, instead of the property becoming getting too far out of my reach, and then I'm not getting that success rate back when I start reviewing year after year, if the property is really giving me back what I want it to give. And a lot of the times the finger is pointed at the farm itself, or pointed everywhere else. And that old saying, when you're pointing one finger at somebody, there's 3 pointing back at you. That's huge, a huge point there when you start talking about the size of the property that you own. Most of the time, a lot of times that I see is folks are over property or over acreage, and they can't buy that. They buy into it, and then they can't maintain it at a proper amount that it takes. It's not cheap. It's not cheap to own these properties and do what you need to do at the level that we want to do. Now, can you do a little bit and be successful? Yes, you can, but that little bit still costs money. So just making sure that your property acreage that you have fits your budget, not only the initial budget, but the budget that's there to help maintain that property throughout the years to come. Number 4 here, we kind of touched on that in the beginning. Number 4 here is a more than just a hunting property. I really believe that there's something to be said for having a property that gives you that return on investment through other avenues than hunting. If it's a property that you're, let's say it's something that maybe that you're leasing, and you know up front it's an agreed arrangement with your spouse or whatever the case is, that you're going to be spending that amount of money every year to have that, and then you're going to spend money traveling to that, and you've got your lodging if there's no cabin on it or whatever that you lease, or your campers or whatever that you take. All that stuff is expensive, but I see that there's the disconnection between all that money going out to a lease or a property that you own just for hunting, and it's kind of dad's property, if you will, and that's where he goes, and we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that, don't touch this, don't touch that, don't go here, don't go there. When that starts becoming a problem, I really see that's where these great properties go from properties that were bought right and maybe are maintained right and they're excellent hunting properties, end up on the sale board. Hopefully that's not through a separation in a relationship, but there's a lot of them that aren't, that are just sold because they start becoming an issue where they're not being used because you can't get there, because the budget doesn't permit it, the family doesn't permit it, and that's kind of that double-edged sword, if you will. So I highly recommend that you look at a property. If is, like I said before, guys, in the number one topic there's a lot of parcels out there that are geared just towards hunting, and that's fine. But knowing going into that, if you have that ability and you have that timeline and that family credibility, if you will, to be able to do that family backing, I guess is a good word, to do that, then by all means make it a whitetail property. Put all your focus in there, and you're going to get, which is a number 5 here, your chances of getting the better return on investment through deer hunting is way better if you have everybody pulling in the right, the harness, pulling in the harness in the right direction, obviously. The problem that I see a lot of, is the return on investment just through deer hunting isn't enough. So that's something to kind of setting those goals. That's that review to look at return on investment. The return on investment, you can when you were talking about deer hunting properties, is tied to the return on investment, is tied directly to the success. If you don't have the success, are you really getting the return on investment that you're putting into the property? And most of the time, if you're not having success on that, as far as pulling the trigger or sending an arrow down range, most of the time that answer is no, we're not getting the return on investment that we want. So that's where I come into this, is I go to these properties, and sometimes, to be perfectly honest with you, a lot of these properties that I go to, I'm a last phone call, I'm a last ditch effort. Here's what we want to do. We want to spend X amount of dollars and have you design it. We want to find out how much it's going to cost, or would cost us to do the work ourselves or somebody else to do it. That's why I do the proposal at the end of these analysis packages. And then that question is answered. Do we need to buy this property? Do we need to sell the property that we have now and buy a bigger property to meet our acreage requirements, or are we over acreage to begin with? And do we need to sell it and get something smaller? So this whole board here, filled with these topics, these number 5, all focused on that return on investment, is a huge part of my business. And it's something that I really focused on years ago, and especially over the last couple of years of doing this full time. To me, guys, this is it's a long-term investment. It's not a buy today and shoot mature deer tomorrow kind of a thing. Now, are there parts of the country that you can do that? Your first sit in a tree stand could be the best deer of your life after you sign the dotted line? Yes, there are. There are many of those properties. The fact is that some of those properties have been through this gauntlet already with someone such as myself that have helped work all the bugs out to make that property successful. And when you buy that property, that's already, the return on investment is already there. The problem with that is that comes with big money, usually, because that property is already producing at the highest rate. So you have to know going into that, are you willing to invest the time that it takes to get that property to not only give you your return on investment through the success of the deer, but are you willing to sacrifice other things as far as other family amenities or family outings, let's say, that all have that powerful meaning that means so much to all of us. So is there a potential to sell the property? Is there a potential to buy it? Is there a potential to make that get that perfect whitetail piece of property that you've always wanted? Yes, there is. But before or during the process, whether you're buying or selling, these are things that I think that a lot of folks don't, maybe that they think about, but they don't. You don't hear someone such as myself talking about them a lot. And to me, and the reason I talk about these is just that, like I said before, I've seen numerous excellent hunting properties that would probably be the best properties that you have ever set foot on, and that I am blessed to be able to see, that are on the chopping block as far as getting sold, and usually at pretty reasonable prices, are getting sold because they're just not getting the return on investment, because they're trying to get all of that return on investment just through deer only, and it's creating an issue. So it's a 5-point board that I keep this whole thing right in my notebook, to be honest with you, all the time. That's something that we strongly look at with our clients. We really talk about, and sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation because they have no intention of selling their property. Other times it turns into an hour and a half conversation, and at the end of it we put it all together. They have their design, and that design and all that is based on the aspect of selling it and helping the next owner take off running. So a couple of points here, guys, to take a look at. If you are in this spectrum right now, whether you're looking to buy or sell, maybe think about these 5 points before you make those decisions.